Mr. Kane.
Chair, I was going to maybe ask Ellen to start. I think her paper gives a broader kind of background before, and then, or sorry, not Ellen, Liz first, and then Ellen, and I was going to come in last, with
grand.
your own indulgence, if that's...
Grant, well, okay. Ms Liz MacDonald to give her opening statement. Ms MacDonald.
I would like to thank you all for this opportunity to address the Joint Committee today, and I wish to outline the Rural Social Scheme and why it's so important to rural Ireland and draw your attention to the challenges that it faces. The RSS is a unique programme that provides financial support to low-income farmers and fishermen to sustain a reasonable livelihood, and in return, participants are engaged for 19.5 hours per week, supporting a broad range of services to our rural communities. The benefits for participants are that it provides a stable income. With farming being a precarious business, a consistent weekly wage is invaluable to the smaller farmer. It also promotes better mental health and well-being. The increased social contact promotes a feeling of belonging and of making a difference. Participants share skills and resources. They forge deep friendships and knowledge of their communities. Indeed, this element was a key to the RSS's ability to provide a first responders approach to the problems presented by the COVID-19 crisis. It promotes safer working practices, making farmers a safer place to work and live, gaining comprehensive health and safety training through programmes such as Safe Pass, manual handling and safe practices through ongoing risk assessments and toolbox talks. There are also benefits to the local communities, as it provides a local workforce with a strong working ethos and an extensive skill set. Farmers tend to be jack of all trades and in many cases masters of many. They possess a unique and integral knowledge of their built, natural and social environments, helping to provide solutions to local challenges. The work carried out by RSS is far-reaching. It includes tidy towns, maintenance of community centres, sporting facilities, churches, cemeteries and Meals on Wheels. The range of projects supported also extend from research, cultural and heritage projects, such as graveyard mapping and historical book writing, to retail support in charity shops. Furthermore, RSS play a key role in promoting and preserving biodiversity through cultivating and maintaining parks, walkways and woodlands. It provides supports to the elderly and vulnerable. Extensive assistance is provided to social service centres, mental and physical health facilities, such as Ability West, Brothers of Charity, Care and Repair, to name but a few. The RSS facilitates participants to build long-term relationships and trust with these vulnerable people. Supervisors also liaise extensively with the district nurses and advanced practitioners to establish the best service fit. The RSS scheme supports many other rural development programmes and projects. It would be difficult to find a project that has received funding from government initiatives that has not relied on the RSS to maintain, sustain and thrive long after the initial investment. Now, I'd like to draw your attention to the challenges faced to the RSS now and into the future. For many years, the RSS quota was not sufficient to meet the demand for places. However, due to the age profile of participants and the current policies governing the RSS, for the first time in 18 years, we are struggling to fill quotas. Supervisors are already fielding complaints and feeling the strains and stresses of not being able to supply the services that our communities depend on. The 6-year rule was introduced in 2017 when the demand for places was greater than the places available. This rule means that participants must leave after 6 years. Therefore, in 2023, many participants will be forced to leave the scheme. This rule fundamentally opposes the very purpose of the RSS, and it is nonsensical in the current environment, having negative effects on our communities. Now, whilst rumour has it that the 6-year rule is under review, it is causing enormous stress to participants who are effectively on notice that they are to lose their jobs next year. So we feel strongly that this restriction should be abolished immediately. Means testing is another barrier. Initially, when the RSS was set up, the participant's spouse could have an off-farm income of €300 a week without affecting their payment. This has significantly changed, having adverse effects on the uptake of RSS positions. Many participants find as their families grow, they have reduced means disregards and find themselves no longer eligible to participate. We ask that the onerous, stringent means testing levels need to be reviewed and recalibrated, particularly for long-serving participants. Means testing should be carried out on an average over a 5-year period, as consideration should be given to the precarious nature of farming, which has peaks and troughs, whereby a good year can be negated by a bad year. The scheme is also not financially attractive to 6,000 farmers in receipt of Farm Assist. We recommend that there is an increase to the top-up of payment from €22.50 to €22.50 to €50 per week. Remembering that our participants are not receiving benefits but are working for these payments and are offering a huge service to the local communities. Consideration could also be given to the following measures to widen the eligibility criteria, like allowing the following to participate: farming nieces and nephews, carers under reduced working hours, isolated people with underlying health issues, rural dwellers with transport issues, and rurally isolated single parents. Now, we know there is a review, an imminent review of the RSS, and we want to emphasise that the RSS supervisors are key stakeholders in the RSS, and that they possess an in-depth knowledge of the operational and strategical potential of the scheme and are the glue that holds the scheme together. However, currently the supervisors are not included in any of these forums or the forthcoming review to discuss and seek solutions and improvements to the scheme. We ask that a representative of the RSS National Committee should be included in any reviews that are proposed. There is also a need for an RSS representative on the ILDN RSS THUS Committee. Also, I'd like to draw your attention to the long-standing issue of RSS supervisors' employment terms. Adrian Kane of SIPTU will be addressing you further on this matter. However, I'd like to highlight that the success of RSS and the reason it is held in such high regard is largely due to the input and nurturing of the RSS supervisors. It is an ever-changing role with many exceptional varied demands that range from project management, community liaison, social work, health and safety officer, manual handling trainers, and many more, all whilst maintaining a positive and supportive manner for participants and communities to accomplish worthwhile projects. Despite our consistent going the extra mile, for over 18 years, the DSP have refused to engage meaningfully to address our punitive working contracts and bring them in line with other comparative jobs. We ask that there is a need immediately for the DSP to re-establish the Tripartite Forum as agreed in 2019, whereby we can collectively address our needs, which are an immediate 15% rise and implementation of a pay scale in line with comparative jobs in the same industry, introduction of an occupational pension scheme, paid maternity leave, and provision of a travel budget to cover the job requirements. So, in last year's government publication, Our Rural Future, the policy reflects on the myriad of opportunities to revitalise our towns and villages. And I hope that you can see that the RSS is a vital cog in achieving this vision and that we will receive your active support to address the issues that I've outlined. Thank you.
Ms MacDonald. So we now call on Ms Ellen Brennan from Mayo North East Leader to make her opening statement.
Thank you for the invitation to speak here, and you can probably tell from my accent I'm not from Mayo. I'm from the Dublin South City Partnership, so I'm not going to go over the same stuff that Liz was talking about, but I just want to outline what THUS is and what THUS supervisors and coordinators do and how the roles have changed and the impact on the community. So THUS was launched in 2010. It's a community activation scheme that provides short-term working opportunities for unemployed people. So it's managed by 49 local development companies nationally for the DSP. which has overall responsibility for the scheme. So to be eligible for the programme, candidates have to be on a job seekers payment for at least 12 months and be in receipt of job seekers allowance. They're referred from the social welfare offices or can self-refer, so up to 30% are allowed to self-refer. And the same as RSS, they're working 19.5 hours a week for 12 months. That's a little bit of a difference. So they have a limit of a year on TUS. So we have quite a high turnover. So the model is that we're playing a key role in social inclusion in rural and urban settings. So we support day centres for the elderly, childcare centres, sports centres, community halls, disability services, environmental groups, heritage services and social enterprises as well. So we have roughly like 1 to 3 participants in each community group. So just to give an example of DSCP that I work with, we have an allocation of 160 placements. So we work with like 80 local community organisations. So we have a really wide reach and that means that we're able to provide really specific opportunities to the candidates, but also we're able to respond quickly to changing needs in the community because of that wide reach. So we also directly run some projects like Care and Repair. So this is a free gardening and handyman service for the over 65s. So we have about 300 regular clients. We fit safety rails, smoke alarms, set mouse traps. We intervene in cases of hoarding, so we do clear outs. So these older people, they don't really have anyone else to help them. They fall between the cracks. So the model is working for supporting all of these local community needs. The only thing that slows us down a bit is getting the referrals from the DSP. So like we're ready, we're well placed to take more people, but we just need candidates. So our placements are key in developing our clients' career progression as well. So approximately 30% of participants go on to full-time employment, 30 to further training or schemes. But the remaining participants, a lot of them would benefit from 1 more year on TUS to become job ready. Now I'm just going to talk a bit about our actual roles as supervisors and coordinators. So our responsibility, our quota was put up to 25 participants each kind of recently. So we have to recruit the candidates and find the placements for them. We look after all of the HR and admin stuff, so it's like payroll, Garda vetting, HR records and reporting to Public and DSP. But on top of that, now that a lot of services gone online, we find ourselves helping clients to like set up bank accounts and phone plans and revenue accounts and filling in social welfare applications. So we're kind of like a one-stop shop for providing all this information and support to remove any barriers to employment. So the role has evolved a lot. And then not a lot of people know about what the coordinating supervisors do. We have all of the same duties as the supervisors, so we're looking after 25 participants and doing all the HR stuff, but we're also line managing a team of supervisors. We're sometimes office managers because we have satellite offices apart from the partnership head offices, and we're looking after data protection, budgets and strategic planning. So it's essentially a programme management role, and for this we only get 5,000 a year of a top-up. So so the model is working well, essentially the way it was set up, but the resources are a bit stretched. So there's a few things there that I think need to be looked at. So the other thing is that our terms and conditions are totally different from the other partnership staff. So we're working alongside other community programmes like SICAP, like the Ability Programme, and you could have, like, say I went out on maternity leave 2 years ago and 2 of my colleagues went out at the same time. They're paid, I wasn't. I had to go on the state maternity. So it's quite unfair. It's a bit of a kick in the face. But, we do it because we love the job and, like, we believe in the programme. So, yeah, there's just a few things that need to be looked at, like, to make it more sustainable and make it more attractive and to retain these, the supervisors that know the field well. So, yeah, I think that's basically it.
Thanks very much,
Thank you.
Ms. Brennan, and apologies for sending you down to Mayo, but I know that the people in Mayo would love migrants from Dublin, particularly those that can play a bit of football. We'll now have Adrian Kane from SIPTU to make an opening statement.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks for the invitation and the opportunity to address the committee here this morning. SIPTU represents the 400 plus supervisors who work in TUS and RSS. And as you've heard, and as the committee is aware, our members provide an invaluable service to local communities and to ensure an effective and professional approach to both community employment and social inclusion. In our submission, we have given an overview of the current services and the structural changes needed, which we believe would greatly enhance the services. And these issues have already been addressed by Liz and Ellen in their opening statements. We will, in my opening statement, concentrate on the industrial relations framework or lack thereof, and outline some of the most pressing issues which we believe your committee may be in a position to offer us some assistance. In relation to the industrial relations framework, our members employed as TUS and RSS supervisors suffer the same fate, unfortunately, as most workers employed across the community sector. They are employees of private companies, typically partnerships and local development companies. The funding for their salaries, however, comes directly from government spending, in this case from the Department of Social Protection. Our members have not had a pay increase for a significant number of years. As a trade union representing this cohort of workers, we find ourselves in a very frustrating position. Employers are, in the main, willing to engage with us. However, they do not have any funds to meet our claims, be that in respect of pay claims, pension provision, sick pay, maternity leave, as you've heard Ellen talking about. We recently concluded negotiations with the Department in respect of a Labour Court recommendation outstanding since 2008 for community employment supervisors concerning pension provision, and that remains unimplemented to date. We note the EU will soon implement a directive concerning minimum rates of pay and collective bargaining coverage. It will soon be incumbent on all member states to increase their collective bargaining coverage to 80% of their national workforces. And if the government intends to give effect to this directive, where better to start, we would argue, than in the community sector, the near abroad, as it were, of the public sector. I want to stress that our members do not have any great desire to become public servants per se, but they do expect their terms and conditions of employment to be fair and to reach a threshold of decency. And this limbo-type situation that trade unions representing workers in the community sector find themselves must come to an end. There were mechanisms in place before which provided for a more normal IR environment. Between 1986 and 2008, for example, our members in TUS and RSS would have received pay increases which mirrored the pay provisions of the social partnership agreements. We have outlined below some of the most pertinent issues which remain outstanding because of the lack of an effective collective bargaining forum for all stakeholders to attend, namely the Department, the ILDN and trade unions. We had most lately on February the 23rd requested that Department of Social Protection re-establish a tripartite forum which had been in place since 2017, comprised of representatives from the Department, ILDN and ourselves. We believe that this was an important body. We still believe that the re-establishment of such a body would be critical to building relationships between the relevant stakeholders. In relation to pay, RSS and TUS play a critical role in promoting social inclusion in both rural and urban settings. It is our firm belief that the roles have evolved in respect of both cohorts in recent years to such an extent that the 15% differential which exists between community employment supervisors' rate of pay and that of RSS and TUS supervisors is neither justifiable nor sustainable. We have approached the Department of Social Protection accordingly, seeking the establishment of an evaluation exercise of the role and duties which these workers are now undertaking. The purpose of the evaluation exercise would be to conduct a comparative analysis between the role and duties of CES supervisors vis-à-vis RSS and TUS. The rate of the additional payment for coordinating supervisors needs also to be the subject of this evaluation exercise. And this is the only objective and fair way in which to validate the basis for any pay claim in reality. We have sought to agree terms of reference and methodology for the conduct of this evaluation exercise. The Department informed the unions at our only meeting with officials, with Department of Social Protection officials today, that they would liaise with officials from the Department of Public Enterprise and Reform in respect of the issue. It should be noted that the conduct of an evaluation of the work and roles of grades of employees is a normal process to adopt within the public sector, where a union believes that there is merit in a regrading exercise. We would ask the committee to use its significant influence to assist SIPTU and these workers in advancing this request. In relation to pension provision, as you're probably aware, our members have no occupational pension scheme, and this is quite frankly intolerable. The standard defence by the department is that it is not the employer, and we think it's a tired refrain and a fig leaf of a defence which simply does not wash with our members. We have sought the immediate introduction of an occupational pension scheme. We have not been prescriptive in our demands and are amenable to discussions around pension model and contribution levels, etc. In relation to worker representation or worker voice, we believe that workers should be included in stakeholder bodies that currently exist. As it stands, SIPTU has no input into the current review being undertaken in respect of RSS. So there is a huge underdevelopment of any sort of social dialogue process in terms of the evolution of services and a worker representative or a worker voice on such bodies. In relation to travel expenses, there is currently a structural problem in the payment of travel expenses for members employed in RSS. There is an effective cap on travel expenses. This is the cause of much frustration for our members, and immediate remedial measures to address same would be welcomed. Schemes need to be funded to a sufficient degree which does not see our members out of pocket, which is currently the case. And the 6-year rule, and Liz would have addressed it in her opening remarks, we believe that the current rule in respect of RSS is undermining the viability of the scheme's primary function, namely the promotion of social inclusion. We would again ask the committee to reflect on the 6-year rule and recommend the elimination of same. In concluding then, the present situation where trade unions are being sent from pillar to post, i.e. from the department to the employer, is not and never was tenable. Last week, hundreds of community sector workers took to the street. They, on average, have not received a pay increase in 14 years. We have served thousands of claims across individual employments. In reality, the only way that issue can be resolved, and that was for the very basic terms of building momentum, the 3%. We now live in an economy that has experienced 7% inflation and will be significantly higher by the end of the year. These people need a pay rise, and I'm not just talking about RSS and TUS, but across the entire sector as well. And that issue can only be addressed by direct engagement with the Department of Social Protection and a whole of government approach. And I would ask you to take that away and that request today. The dysfunctional nature of industrial relations which prevails across the community sector urgently needs to be addressed. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thanks very much. I thank all the witnesses for their evidence and their supporting documentation that they have submitted. The first member that is indicated is Deputy O'Keefe, followed by Deputy Curran.
Thank you for the submissions, and I'll try to be brief. To put it in a nutshell, do I understand that what you're looking for is parity with what the CE supervisors have? Yes. And that in time, once the pension arrangements concluded there, would incorporate you in the whatever pension arrangements they arrive at as well? Okay. Now, is there a role for the WRC here? Yeah, okay. So that's second question, right? Just on the actual participants on the scheme, I have never agreed with the 6-year rule. And I'm interested to hear that you favour abolishing that. Another hugely detrimental effect on participants' wages was that they now get net of the farm income once they're getting over the basic rate, which means that anybody who's got a partner or children is getting exactly 5 euro a week for 19.5 euros, for 19.5 hours work. So they must be the lowest paid people in the country. And I think that is, and maybe you could outline how that's affecting interest in the scheme from people in that cohort. And is it getting difficult now to fill the vacancies on the scheme, since there's only a finite amount of farmers and fishermen anyway eligible for the scheme? So I'd be interested in how that's affecting, because that's a huge hit in people's income, because originally when the scheme was devised, once you qualified for the scheme, you got the full rate for the job. Once you came under the threshold that you had an underlying entitlement to farm assist or to job seekers allowance or disability allowance or whatever. So you might let. Now, in relation to TOOS and participants, it was never intended that it'd be a one-year scheme by the Minister at the time, and I was the Minister at the time, and I know what I intended. That was the Department of Finance, as it was at the time, decision, and if any of you can remember 210, it was an achievement to get it through in that particular budget at all as a scheme. It's not really meant to be an activation scheme as such. In other words, the idea was that you'd go on CE for 3 years. If you failed to get a job, this was meant to be a permanent work scheme like RSS. Because there are people who will work very well and happily on schemes who are unlikely to get commercial employment. And it's a myth that everybody in the economy is going to get commercial employment. And we all know, anybody who's actually worked on the ground with these schemes, that that's a reality. But they're doing huge work in society at a very economic cost. But creating this, that, the biggest complaint I would get, and I think a lot of my colleagues would get, is people wanting to stay on schemes because they're not going to get commercial employment and they don't want to go back to job seekers allowance and the numbing experience of not having a purpose in getting up in the morning and going somewhere and doing. So I'd be interested in terms of your views on the participants, whether there's a need now to reform TOOS and its role to what it was originally meant to be, i.e. a follow-on. You do your training, activation, all the rest. If you fail to get a job, you go on it. Now, it wouldn't stop you moving from TOOS into commercial employment. But if you didn't, you weren't going to be thrown back on the scrap heap. That was the idea of it.
Thanks, Deputy O'Cleave. We'll start with Mr. Kane, and if anyone else wants to come in, they just might indicate.
Okay. And just address the issue that you've raised with regard to the role of the WRC. We would have addressed this committee last year in respect of local employment services, whereby the department has refused to attend at the WRC. And I have no doubt that if we ask them to attend at the WRC, they will refuse to attend. They have used language to say that they would assist the WRC. I'm not really sure what that means, but they have refused to attend. Now, we had a Labour Court recommendation with regard to the CE supervisors going back to 2008. We negotiated an agreement only last year. So that took 14 years almost to implement, and it still hasn't been implemented. So the issue really, I think, that resolves it. I'm not going to the WRC, and I'd have to refer 50 or 60 cases of each individual partnership or local development company. That's what we'll end up with doing. We need direct engagement in a collective bargaining forum that has some weight and that treats us as equals, as you normally get in a collective bargaining forum. Other than that, if we go down to the WRC or get a Labour Court, all I'm doing is leading these people around on a merry-go-round, and nothing will be achieved because they'll say, that's not us, we're not the employer, we're not implementing it. So we're caught in this bind the whole time. So some of the points that I've made in terms of this entire sector is broken, and it needs to be fixed. And the only people who can fix it is a whole of government approach, but particularly from the Department of Social Protection. And I'll ask my colleagues to come in on some of the more specific questions that you've had.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with Deputy O'Keefe in relation to the reforms of TUS. We had an interesting insight to the extension of TUS as we came out of the lockdown after COVID, where the contracts were actually extended. And we've seen the benefits of that in terms of the participant and the provision of the actual service as well. It meant so much to people for their contracts to be extended. So we've seen the benefits of the contract being extended, and we definitely would welcome reform in that regard. One of the fundamental issues here, I suppose, in relation to the referrals is the actual referral system itself. It seems to vary across the country in terms of the referrals from the DSP. Some offices seem to be better than others. And a bit of creativity possibly around there might be needed, a bit of effort on the side of the DSP side. Just want to make an interesting or quite unfortunate stat here. The youth unemployment in Ireland is quite high. So there may be a possibility for TUS to engage in that aspect of it. It's about 15.8%. It's very, very high. And we have seen it over the years, the fallout in relation to long-term unemployed for youth and all the issues that go with that. So I definitely think there's an avenue for TUS to play there in terms of looking at solutions in terms of long-term unemployed for the under 25s. But I do agree with O'Keefe, or with Deputy O'Keefe, where we do need to start looking at, you know, TUS being extended that bit more, maybe to 2 or 3 years. And a little bit of creativity around that would be very much welcome. Thank you. Mr. Broderick.
Thank you, Chair. Just in answer to Deputy O'Keefe's question on the €25 top-up, really what we're actually doing is we're asking people to come out to work for 5 days in the fortnight or 19.5 hours a week for €25. And we're all, I'm sure, here today well aware of the travel costs at the moment and that. And really what you're doing is you're asking them to dig into what is already their social welfare payment in order to support themselves coming out to work. The other thing that I would just like to mention as well is the means test, which Liz spoke about a few minutes ago. And it's gone very stringent, we'll say, on people that's on schemes at the moment. And one issue that we have come across is likes of property, we'll say, a second house where somebody might have inherited grandmother's or family home, and it's the value of the property that's taken into account rather than the income coming from the property. And in a lot of cases it's been passed on to a grandchild or what have you. I have one case at the moment outstanding where somebody inherited a house and the value of the house was taken into account, so the participant has to now leave the scheme until they can come up with the funding to get that house transferred onto the daughter. So those are my points. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Broderick. Deputy Curran.
And thank you all very much for coming in this morning. I think it's so important that we hear from particularly the supervisors on the ground in relation to TUS and the Rural Social Scheme. And I think in all of the opening statements that we've heard this morning, you're all putting forward practical suggestions. And I think that shows us the benefit of actually listening to the people on the ground, because you know the schemes best. And I hope that is something that will play into the upcoming review in relation to the Rural Social Scheme. Just firstly, in relation to the Rural Social Scheme, you mentioned the age profile of participants. Could you maybe speak a little bit more in relation to that? Like, what is the current age profile today? You've mentioned the struggle to fill quotas. I know in your briefing documentation you mentioned the national quota being 3,350. In recently raising the issue of the review and when it will actually happen, which we still don't know when it will happen, Minister O'Brien at the end of March did confirm that there are 2,969 people presently on RSS, and that 1,493 of those will not be impacted by the 6-year rule. Now that leaves over 1,400 people that will be impacted by the 6-year rule, and that is almost half of the entire quota in the state for RSS, so that is of huge concern. But the Minister has, in fairness to him, said that as part of that review he is very well aware of the issues that have been raised in relation to the 6-year rule, and I think it's so important, and this committee now and the work we're undertaking is timely, because I hope we can feed in to that review when it will happen. But I think those figures do cause alarm, and I just wonder, in relation to those figures and the impact on the 6-year rule, can you tell us what that actually means on the ground? Because if these figures are correct in that there's 3,350 is the full quota, and the Minister says that currently 2,969 are presently on it, that means there are 531 vacancies throughout the state, and I'd imagine the impact on that is services not being able to run as they should, and obviously that has an impact. And I'm sure everyone on the committee agrees it will be essential that the key stakeholders, and that is yourselves, that ye do feed in, that ye are heard in relation to the review when it will come, and that is absolutely critical. There's no point in having the review if that doesn't happen, in my mind. In relation to TUS, I wonder if you could speak to us a little bit more about the actual challenge that is the referrals. So maybe if you could speak to us about the referral process. I've heard of places where they'll receive a list from the department, they'll go through ringing the people on that list. Some of them won't bother taking up a place in TUS, and they don't actually have to, which is quite unusual, because in a lot of the other schemes you have to take up a place. So if you could just maybe speak to us in relation to that a little bit more, and the level of refusal maybe as well, like, is that as it seems? I think the idea of going from 1 year to 2 years is something that should be considered and really considered, because 1 year isn't a lot of time, and as has been said, you provide a lot of wraparound supports, as do the RSS, and they're really important, because not for everyone is it just a job, any job. People require an awful lot more in some instances, and it's not just a job. Can you also maybe just explain the difference between the 2 supervisors and the coordinating supervisors, and maybe the numbers that are in each at the moment? I think the independent evaluation is a fair ask, and I think that's something that should be undertaken. I had asked that TUS would be included in the review, and that a review would happen in relation to TUS. That's not happening, it's not on the table. So I think an independent evaluation kind of versus CE would be important. And just to say, in relation to both schemes, given that the local employment services and job clubs are more or less totally gone now, or will be in a couple of months' time, I think the fact that that model is changing and changing drastically, that means the RSS and the TUS is more important than it ever was before for that community-based model that is so important, because there'll be so few schemes with that community basis left. And then just to SIP2, firstly in relation to the pension, and it's been said by both RSS and TUS they don't have an occupational pension. The deal that's been done for CE, do ye intend now to seek a similar deal for the RSS and for TUS? Because obviously the Labour Court recommendation, that's at last been resolved, albeit they haven't been paid yet, but that will happen. But I just wonder, is that your intention now to pursue that? I know you've probably pursued it all along, but I mean more kind of vocally, or whatever you want to say. And then in relation to just lastly, the lack of a forum, which all of you have mentioned, I think that's important. It was mentioned the Department, IDLN, ILDN and the trade unions and the tripartite. Like, what's the issue with the department in relation to why that collapsed or didn't work or didn't function? And I just wonder, like, what did the department say to you when you raised that? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Broderick.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back to one or two points Deputy Duran made there, I suppose the age profile, the reason it is at a higher age rather than the lower age is because an awful lot of the younger farmers now won't depend on a scheme. They're gone back into full-time employment and they're doing part-time farming. The older farmers from probably in or about the 50s or thereabouts are the people that is coming out on the schemes and that needs the schemes more, because the chances of those people getting back into full-time employment may be a lot less than a younger person. I suppose on the referral system, we'll say for TUS, it's just not getting enough of referrals. We have lots and lots of work placements to place people in, but the supply of referrals coming through from the Department of Social Protection is not adequate. And as you mentioned yourself there's a lot of people that we contact that doesn't want to engage in TUS, even though they're declaring on their initial letter to social welfare that they are interested. And really all we're doing is going round in a circle. Their name is coming to us, they refuse to come out in the scheme, or they don't engage with us. Then they go back to social welfare again and they say yes again to the next letter, and we're really going nowhere. I suppose the other thing as well on the RSS side of it is that the eligibility for people to take part on the scheme would help us quite a lot if it was opened up a little bit more. We have a lot of people, and especially down in the western counties along the western seaboard, where you have maybe the niece or the nephew of the original herd owner actually doing the farm work. But because the uncle or the aunt hasn't signed over the place to the niece or the nephew, they're not an eligible person to take part in the scheme, even though they need it, but they still can't come out on it. And if that was relaxed a little bit, it would open up a lot more numbers to the rural social scheme. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brennan.
Yes, just to talk about the challenge, excuse me, the challenge with the referrals. So, yeah, we're quite lucky in DSCP because the office, I'm not going to name it, that we deal with is really good at actually sending this over. But we do find that I think maybe the internal system there is somehow, like within the whole of the DSP, isn't really working. And I know that they're setting up a completely new office to deal with that. So we really welcome that. So because we tend to get like the same clients referred to us again and again, and they might not be coming on to TUS because they are actually not eligible for TUS. So they could be on disability payment or in full-time education, or so it's not that people are refusing, it's just that they're not eligible for the programme. Now, we do get a few refusals at first, but because, you know, I was talking about how like the variety of placements that we have. So we get people who they don't want to come onto TUS, but then once they come in and talk to us and they see like really the opportunities that are there, like they usually change their minds. So it's just a matter of getting them in the door to meet us and to like see what the opportunities are. So yeah, like our ethos is to like look at what they want to do for their own career and find a placement to suit that rather than the other way around. So that works pretty well. So yeah, I'm not overly concerned about the level of refusals really. It's just we definitely need more people. And you see, it was only a couple of years ago that it came out that we were able to take on self-referrals. So up until a couple of years ago, we weren't allowed to advertise TUS placements. So a lot of people don't know about TUS. So it's quite recent now that we're starting to promote it around the place. So I think as the word gets out there, we might be able to get more people that way. But at the moment, we're still really relying on the social welfare direct referrals. So you were asking about the difference between supervisors and coordinators. So basically, I told you about what the supervisors do. They're looking after the participants and doing all the paperwork and everything, and you know, developing links with the community groups. So the coordinators have to oversee all of that because there's like, as I mentioned, you know, that we have a huge reach in the community, and so I have to make sure that as the role of supervisor is developing, that our staff are being trained up to be able to deal with that appropriately. So making sure that all of the supervisors get like proper training in supervisory management, for example, and in data protection because of all this like new information that we're having to hold on to. So stuff like that. Yeah, it's all of the reporting that goes with it as well. So it's kind of, you know, and because of this thing of the self-referrals coming in and the need to promote more and to kind of strategize more, like that's very time consuming, and like it's a dynamic program, but all of the management of it is a lot to take on, like for the 5,000 a year plus doing all the stuff the supervisors do. So yeah, so that's the difference between the supervisor and the coordinator. The coordinator manages the program basically and, you know, like oversees it.
Thank you. Mr. Corcoran.
Chair, so you can see, just to as well reply to Claire's question, you can see that the running theme here is the referrals. The referrals is the key problem, and it's hugely important that we have that working well because we need that provision of services as well. So there's a couple of kind of measures there that we see would improve that volume of referrals. That's the key thing, is the volume of referrals. So, for example, if you've a participant who is currently claiming for their partner, there's no provision for them to refer to TUS because they're not accountable to the social welfare system. They're being claimed for by somebody else. So therefore, they're not eligible to come on TUS at any point until they open a claim in their own right. So that would free up a lot of referrals, and it would really improve the volume. The other thing there as well is the over 55s, we'll say. So people who were that bit more closer to retirement. There should be a provision there that anybody on the TUS scheme should be allowed to stay on if they so wish, in conjunction with the TUS supervisor. That would be a key element in terms of experience, but also the provision of the services as well, because these are the services that are being provided, they're fundamental to a lot of the end users, such as the Meals on Wheels, who a lot of people depend on that service. Like a lot of this stuff is mainly operational stuff. In some cases, it may be nearly cost neutral, but it's something the DSP need to look at in terms of the increase in the volume of referrals, and it would go a long way to addressing that.
Thank you, Mr. Larkin.
Okay, question there that Deputy Corinne asked there about the lack of the forum, okay? We as RSS supervisors, you know, we are major stakeholders, you know, in the whole implementing of the scheme, you know. We're a cog, right? We're being left outside the circle. The forum was there between ILDN, the department and the RSS National Committee. In 2017, this failed dramatically because the department wouldn't engage with us. We had meetings set up with them, they reneged, and they left us outside the circle. The robot is inside the circle. And I think if anything is to come out of today, we would like to be inside the circle here to put in our tuppence worth to the review. And, you know, this would make a very good review if we were inside with them. We're soldiers on the ground. We know the way it works. We implement it, you know. And if anything's about this today, I would like to see, you know, that this tri-party talks, and including SIP doing that we would have that, and that would start immediately again, you know, for the review. Thank you, Caleb.
Senator Wall.
Could I just...
Sorry, yeah, Mr. Kane.
Yeah, just to respond to Deputy Curran also asked the question in terms of, say, the pension settlement. What I would say to you is that the pension settlement in respect of the community employment supervisors is less than satisfactory, and that's using very parliamentary type language. After 14 years, people were wore down, and we accepted what we got, which is essentially a gratuity that looked very much like statutory redundancy. It's not a pension scheme. That's the reality of it. What we're looking for is a pension scheme. It opens the door in terms of that the department came up with some monies to address that issue. But we're not going to be fobbed off on that the third tier of pensions is going to come in. I mean, I'd be very concerned in terms of the uncertain economic space that's ahead of us, as that's something is typically pushed down for another number of years. So we are looking for a pension scheme. Certainly, if it's good enough for community employment supervisors to have something resembling a pension scheme, but we need something along those lines. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wall.
Thank you very much, Chair. I also want to welcome and thank all our guests this morning for the considerable input. I'm very familiar, obviously, with the RIS and two schemes. I think they're vital for our community. Social inclusion has been mentioned a number of times this morning, and for any community that any of our members here are involved in, both RIS and TUS are essential for that and community inclusion. A number of the questions I had have been asked already, but I would just like to address a couple of issues. First of all, maybe with SIP2. When we met this time last year, we spoke about you meeting the department directly and a wish for that. Has that happened? How many times have you met the department? And have you met them in relation to specifically RSS and TUS? And maybe, Mr. Kane, you could lead us on and let us know that. I know that was a wish of yours the last time we met, and we did discuss that particular issue with you the last time you met. Just in relation to TUS first, trust. I am aware of a number of issues in relation to referrals, and it's been dealt in detail this morning, and particularly about referrals coming back of unsuitable people or candidates coming back from the department. And is that a serious problem? It's something I'm hearing about from a number of different schemes where people are just coming again and being referred again, and maybe somebody could comment on that. Very taken in relation to Mr Cochrane's youth unemployment, and it's an issue that I've brought up a number of times here in the Shannon and through the Oireachtas as well. What does he see of how we can actually target maybe and help that particular cohort of people to get involved with RSS, which has been mentioned, but also with TUS, and most importantly with TUS, because the benefit of getting our youth involved with community is really essential for the future of our communities. You know, I'm involved with a number of community groups, and there's no doubt that we're all of an age where we're looking to the future, and the future needs young people involved in our community. So maybe that's somewhere that we can get and target youth unemployment. I think that's it is very important. In relation to both RSS and TUS, supervisor training has been mentioned. I'm aware of the wonderful supervisors that we have that go up, over and beyond on a daily basis, and it has been mentioned by Ellen in relation to that it's a one-stop shop almost. You're getting comments, you're getting questions on every aspect of community life and indeed day-to-day life. So is there enough supervisor training? What else would you like to see in RSS or indeed TUS? I know you would obviously like to see the payment for that, which is essential, and obviously I would support that. It's unbelievable that we don't have sick pay, maternity leave or adequate travel expenses at this stage, but is there enough training there? And then obviously, just to finish up, Chair, in relation to the supervisors, I think it's essential that expertise is maintained. That is essential for the future of both these schemes, as been mentioned by two of the colleagues, and we have to reward that expertise. And I think one of the contributors mentioned that the love of the job. The love of the job is great, there's absolutely no doubt about that, but there has to be recompense to go with the love of the job. And I think that's what you've all asked here this morning, and it's something we as a committee need to address as well, because it's essential for our communities that that expertise is maintained and brought forward for the future. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Wall. Mr Kane.
Just in answering the kind of industrial relations side of the questions posed by Senator Wall, when we met last year in relation to the LES and job clubs, we've had very poor engagement with the department since. And we have not established a mechanism yet to deal with the impending redundancies in the sector. We had a meeting with the department yesterday which was far from satisfactory, and we're going nowhere in resolving that, and we're looking at hundreds of redundancies, and the department is refusing to step up to the mark in terms of trying to fund what's going to come out of that. Coming back to this group, we did meet with the department earlier in the year in relation to RSS and TUS, but we haven't made much progress in terms of a very reasonable request for an evaluation process, which is typical in terms of you know, where a grade of employees has evolved, the work has changed, etc., to come back and have some evaluation. That's all we're looking for, an independent mechanism to do that. And either the claim falls or it has merit, but that's an objective analysis is something that we're up for, because we believe, you know, 15% is a huge differential in pay between community employment supervisors and the people that we're representing here, and it's not tenable, and it really does need to be addressed urgently.
Thank you, Deputy Canny. Thank you very much, Chair. And first of all, I'm not a member of the committee, but I feel so passionate about the rural social schemes and what they do in communities. And I'm delighted to welcome Elizabeth and the two Seans here this morning from Galway Rural Development, based in my own constituency, as well as the other representatives that are here. At the outset, I would say that the impact that the rural social schemes have had since they were first initiated by Deputy O'Keefe back in time have been enormous in rural communities. First of all, to the communities themselves. Secondly, for the positivity that has created for the participants, and the network it has created right across rural Ireland in terms of the work that's been done, the camaraderie that's there, and the benefits that people get. And I suppose I'm going to divide my piece of time into two particular things. First of all, with the participants, I do believe that the 6-year rule has reached its end of life, if one might call it that, and that should be now taken out, and everybody should be allowed to remain on the scheme for the full duration of their time. At the time when it was introduced in 2017, it was because there was demand to get into the scheme. At this stage now, we have the demand is for participants to be allowed into the scheme. So what we have to do is adjust it. 2017 is 5 years ago, and I think we have to review it and say, right, okay, this is something that needs to be done. The other thing I've come across just in relation to participants is that nieces and nephews of farmers are excluded from becoming participants. And in lots of cases, that is ruling out a lot of good people who could be part of the scheme. So the niece and nephew of a farmer could be, if they were allowed to go on the scheme, I think it would enhance the numbers that would be available and would also provide additional participants for the scheme. The other thing that I feel we need to do as well is we need to look at the participation of people with disabilities in the schemes, and to make sure that we are actually bringing in people with disabilities and giving them a sense of purpose, an employability type of arrangement, so that they can actually be a first step towards getting work or whatever. Not that it's a job creation, but there's lots of things that could be done by people with disabilities on the rural social schemes, and I know that firsthand. So I would say that there are things that we need to do, Chair, and probably if you're making submissions or doing reviews, I think we need to do that. The supervisor, basically we have an inequality. I think Adrian mentioned a 15% pay rise difference, or pay difference between CE supervisors. I'm also very conscious of the long road it took to get what was got out of the department, both the Department of Social Protection and the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, because they are very they play one off against the other, and they put you back and over like a tennis ball when it comes to things like this. And this is being honest. I hear what you're saying, and I think the direct route is to get somebody to sit down independently and look at the situation that's there. And I think that is a highly sensible way to actually get this, bring it to a head as quickly as possible, so that this anomaly isn't going on for the next 10 to 14 years like the CE schemes were, and then to get something at the end of it which wasn't exactly what it wasn't fair enough, but it was something. The other part of going back to the eligibility, and I know Sean Broderick mentioned about a case where somebody got a house, and there's a notional income put on that house. That house is not fit to be rented out or whatever, but there's a notional income put on that based on the Department of Social Protection's mechanisms for creating that notional income, and it meant that a person had to leave the scheme. That house will never be rented. It'll be passed on to a grandchild, and is in the process of doing that. But in the meantime, the participant has been penalised because they were. So I think that overall, with the Department of Social Protection, that's something we need to look at. The big ask that I get from participants is when they're on the scheme and they're doing their work and they're delighted to be at it, but when they sit down and they think about it, maybe on a Sunday after having the dinner, or they're watching the match or whatever, they're going to a match and thinking, you know, what is out of it for us apart from the participation? And the €25 a week is not real when you think of the benefits that are accruing to every community. Somebody mentioned Meals on Wheels, there's the Irish Wheelchair Association, there's cancer care services, there's all kinds of services that are benefiting enormously from this. I don't really have any questions other than to offer my total support to everybody who is coming here today as witnesses to present the case. We will work with you, and I will work with you, as will the Chair and every member here, to ensure that what was set up as a very good scheme, I don't know how many years ago it was, 2003. So basically what we need to do is we need to recalibrate it now to make it, again, fit for purpose for the next 10 years. And I think now it's very timely to do it now. So I thank everybody for coming in. I thank you, Chair, for allowing me the time, and the other members as well. Thank you. Councillor Kenny, Ms MacDonald.
Yes, I'd just like to address the issue of the impact that Deputy Curran mentioned there, the impact of the reducing numbers on the rural social scheme, and indeed the reducing numbers that we have on THUS. The work that's undertaken by this cohort of people is so invaluable out there, and we are already on the ground having to do fishes and loaves with many, many groups, and we're managing just at the moment to do the fishes and loaves, spread it around, simply because, particularly the RSS participants, they're happy to go to their extra hours. They don't count 19.5 hours. They're there. They will go to the 35. They will do it during and the weather. If the day's right, they come out in the weather day, whether it be Saturday and Sunday. They belong on. They own these jobs, and they take great passion in doing their jobs. So they're doing that, but then they've got mileage. We're moving them around. They're asking them to move more frequently now to be able to meet the demands. But there's petrol and everything involved in that. And so, you know, the amount they're getting is absolutely peanuts to what they're actually doing. They really, really need to have an awful lot, what to call it, more money in their pocket to be able to do the job, but also for self-worth in the work that they're doing. They do view this as a job, not a social welfare payment. And they're doing it because they want to better their communities. So I do think that we should really, really look at widening the eligibility criteria. So can I just throw, there are some areas that do need, you know, sort of look. We have carers. We have carers out there who are looking after sort of mothers or fathers in the family. A lot of them, as soon as they go on, they've had to become carers. They have to leave the Rural Social Scheme because they're only allowed to do 15 hours work if they're a carer. The Rural Social Scheme asks for 19.5 hours. And it just makes no sense. They are actually leaving work that they're only getting €22.54 to sit at home, be more isolated, simply because you won't let them do an extra 4.5 hours work.
It's actually an extra hour, it's 18.5 hours. It's 18.5 hours in the caring.
Yeah, the 18.5 hours.
No, but it's 19.5. Caring went up from 15.5.
Oh, did what? Actually, you're ahead of me.
It's not quite at 19.5.
Yes, so it's 1 hour, yeah. So, but but it is something that needs to be looked at because those people actually do need to be brought out into and socialised as well. And just generally widening it, so that there's I believe, is that anyone who has the capacity to work living in rural Ireland, but not the capacity to get, sort of can't move, whether it be for other transport or whatever, they should be allowed to come out in the scheme. If they're in receipt of a payment, it's $22.50 that they're getting, and the work is so much worth it. Also, can I just mention the supervisors' salaries and everything? It has been a long, long time. It's been on the agenda. There was nothing for 10 years then. There was a minimum sort of input there in 2017. And now we have such economic pressures. I ask you, you know, that this can't go on forever. We have a situation, we have supervisors who rely on their cars to do their work. The salaries that they're getting does not even lend them to buy a decent car or even to fix the cars at times if something happens. So there needs to be some immediate input put into resolving this situation. So there you are.
Thank you, Mr. Broderick.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things that I'd like to add in. Obviously, we're all very delighted to be here today and to put our points across. But I believe that at this time, we're at a crucial point in the schemes. We're a third of the way into 2022. And I know our company, anyway, has been informed that if we don't fill our quota by the end of the year, our funding will be cut. If funding starts to get cut, then the partnership companies will tend to go away from the schemes because there'll be nothing there for them. So I think if anything needs to be done or addressed, it needs to be done fairly quickly. And also that whoever it would be, that we would have a voice at that table. Also from the RSS point of view, as regards participants and the 6-year rule, that is now crucial as well at this point because we have been instructed to issue contracts only to the end of the 6 years, whether that be, I think in some of the cases for us, is next February. So we have a very short window to try and get things done. So I'd just like it that it be urgent more so now than just left in the long finger for a period of time, because otherwise the schemes will die, and if they do start to die, that's the end of them. They're gone. Thank you, Chair.
Just to come back to Senator Wall's contribution in relation to youth unemployment, I suppose ultimately it's back to the DSP because they've got the demographics and they've got the data, so they know the exact percentages in the various areas. One thing I would say that would go a long way in addressing the referrals in relation to youth unemployment would be the eligibility of 1 year. So you have to be on a job seeker's payment for 1 year to qualify for TUS. So if you're long-term unemployed, like a year is a long time if you're a young person, and that vacuum can fill up with negative things, I suppose, too. So early intervention there is so important. So that could be controlled by the local DSP office to refer, say, participants under the age of 25, but that each supervisor or each scheme would hold a percentage on their scheme for that under 25 group. The other thing is, as well, by removing the 1 year rule, you could actually engage with a lot of the colleges and the training organisations, because once people finish on a Friday, and if they have no job to go to, potentially they should be able to come on with us to get that year experience, that they don't just fall into this long-term unemployed bracket. So that would be a measure that they could move on quite quickly. And just in relation to the long-term unemployed, so just the removal of the year would go a really long way to addressing that. I'm just going to refer just to Ellen, Chair, if you don't mind, because she's got just a couple of points on that, just in relation to Senator Wall's question.
Yeah, you were asking about the ineligible referrals, and yeah, there's some kind of a systems issue in there in the DSP. So it's not the staff. The staff are working really hard in there. I know that for a fact, but it's somehow the referral system structure needs to be looked at, because they're not able to, there's so many eligible people on the live register, but they don't seem to be able to get them and send them to us. So I don't know what the issue is. They just need to look at that, because TUS, we're here, we have loads of jobs available. We could be integrating the young people. We could also be integrating new immigrants that are coming in all the time, because we've got loads of these multicultural community groups, and that's the way to get people integrated into Irish society, is working together, so. And then you were asking about training budgets. Yeah, training is really important, just to make sure that the quality of the programme develops. So yeah, if we could have some kind of an allocation for that, that would be very welcomed.
Mr. Larkin.
Just in relation to a question there that Claire, Deputy Craig asked earlier on there. A cost-benefit analysis was carried out in the Rural Social Scheme in 2009. We're probably 5 years into the scheme at this stage. And for every euro that the government put in at that stage, we had to pay back of €2.89. And maybe this was probably a bit of the part of the collapse of the forum as well. We put on extensive pressure on the department to carry out another cost-benefit analysis, and they absolutely wouldn't hear of it, because I would tell you the figures would quadruple, for what we are worth and what we are saving the government. So I don't think, being around the table here, what we're looking for is a big ask for the amount of money we're saving the government. Thank you.
Thank you. Do SIP2 want to make any comments? Any further comments? Sorry.
I think in just finishing up, and thanks again for the invitation and the engagement that we've had with all the members, and I appreciate also Deputy Canny's attendance here. We have a serious situation in the particular here with regard to a significant differential on rates of pay of people doing very, very similar work, and we have outlined a path forward of how that can be resolved. But there's the bigger issue as well across the entire sector of, for most people, no pay increase in the last 14 years. And the department and a government, and it really needs a whole of government response in terms of, and I've talked about the EU directive on collective bargaining, of coming to the table, of how we find a way of funding the community sector, that people have reasonable terms and conditions of employment. People don't want to become public servants. And, the fear I know that every official that I meet is, Jesus, I open the door at all. and claims are going to come, etc. We can create safeguards for the state in terms of, we don't want to be public servants, but we want to be paid decently, we want to have security of tenure, and we want to have decent pensions. Okay, and I don't think that's too much to ask for in this day and age. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kane. I think it's a good way to conclude in relation to the meeting this morning. I think, look, it's very clear from the meeting this morning that the Rural Social Scheme is not an activation scheme and therefore shouldn't have a time limit in relation to it. And I think, you know, the reality is, and we've had evidence here this morning, that many of the participants on the scheme are working in excess of the 19.5 hours, because for them there is the self-worth in relation to that work, but also the impact in the local community, because the participants see firsthand the impact it is having on a community, in the community. And I think participants should receive the full rate of payment irrespective of means. And I think that the current rate of payment at €1.28 per hour is not equitable, and it is not justifiable, and I think this issue needs to be urgently revisited. I think Mr Broderick and Deputy Canny raised an important issue in relation to someone inheriting a house, and this is a problem right across our social welfare system. And we have the perverse system in this country at the moment where we have a housing emergency in every single community across this country today. And yet, if anyone were to release that house or to rent that house out at the moment, they're actually penalised in relation to the social welfare system. Which makes absolutely no sense at the moment, where we have the Department of Social Welfare actively blocking the release of properties for rental in the middle of a housing crisis. I think in relation to the TUS, I think the 12-month limit needs to, the 12-month limit on participation needs to be urgently revisited, particularly in many parts of the country where there isn't anyone willing to take up that position when it becomes available anyway. And the 3-year prohibition on going back on the scheme needs to be looked at as well, as is the issue of the referrals. And we've seen this firsthand in our own part of the country, where you're straddling different counties, when you're straddling different social welfare regions, where the referrals are not coming through, and there seems to be a lack of joined up thinking there in relation to that. Just finally, I think the issue in relation to the treatment of supervisors, whether it be CE, TUS or RSS, needs to be urgently reviewed, because they are the linchpin in terms of the success of the scheme and the engagement of individuals within communities right across the country. And I think, you know, the evidence from Ms Brennan here this morning, specifically highlighting the issue of paid maternity leave, highlights the discrimination that's there in relation to it. Here we have a scheme that's been publicly funded, where we're engaging with people who sadly are on the margins of society, trying to bring them back into the mainstream of society, whether it be in terms of their own social engagement, their own self-worth, the impact it's having in the local community. And we're not even prepared to provide the supervisors with maternity leave. And I think, you know, we've heard a lot in terms of issues of access and discrimination, in terms of participation of women in the workforce. I think this is very low-hanging fruit that needs to be urgently addressed. So I'd like to thank witnesses for attending here today and for your constructive and very positive engagement with the committee. It's our intention as a committee to present a report on our deliberations to Minister Humphreys, with the hope that the committee's deliberations and recommendations will be taken on board by the Department. Go raibh míle maith agóibh, go léir.